Welcome to the webinar to celebrate International Women's Day. We're delighted to have Véronique Sanders joining us from Château Haut-Bailly in conversation with one of our own NWs here at Berry Brothers, Barbara Drew. So I'm one of the account managers, a handful of female account managers we have here at Berry Brothers and Rudd. My name is Henrietta, and I'm going to be comparing this session, helping to answer any questions that you might have and field them onto these two wonderful women we've got with us today. We thought it was the perfect time because we've got the Bordeaux campaign coming up in a few weeks to really pick Véronique's brain on all the wonderful things in Bordeaux and of course particularly celebrate the female winemakers from the region. Just before we get started, to mention a little bit of admin, if you could post any questions you have in the Q&A box below, we'll pick them up after the initial interview session and I'll be fielding them to Barbara and Véronique. Thank you very much for joining. Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us this lunchtime, and a huge thank you, Véronique, for joining us this afternoon. We're really delighted to be able to take some of your time and pick your brains this afternoon. Château Haut-Bailly is a property in Bordeaux which we have long admired. We have worked with Haut-Bailly for many years. We love the wines, we love Véronique's philosophy, so much that we actually work with Haut-Bailly to make an exclusive wine just for us, our very own Pessac Lyonnais. It is absolutely delicious, a staple in my household. And we're particularly excited to have Véronique joining us today because as well as leading such a magnificent property in Pessac, she also has the advantage of perspective on how things have changed in Bordeaux. So this year marks 25 years of Château Haut-Bailly since Wilma's family took over. And she has been at the helm for more than 2 decades, which really gives an insight not only into how things are currently in Bordeaux, but also how they have changed. So really excited to be talking with you today, Véronique. To kick things off, can you please tell us just a little bit about your career so far? How did you get into wine and what do you do in your role today?
Well, thank you, Barbara, and thank you all for being for joining this webinar today. Yes, I started actually 25 years ago, and I'm the 3rd generation of the family Sanders at the head of this property, although we don't own it since 25 years anymore. So it's been 70 years we are there, but only now today for the family Wilmers, who purchased the estate to my family in 1998. And I have to say that it's thanks to Bob Wilmers, who was a wonderful man and an incredible American banker who had the audace to trust a woman, that I'm at the head of it, and I have the huge privilege and honor to preside the destiny of Haut-Bailly. At that time, you didn't have many women, and you didn't have either many young people running estates. So it was a challenge, and it's been 25 wonderful years, I have to say, made of respect, trust, amazing collaboration. So it was good for Haut-Bailly.
And I mean, you mentioned that when you started, there were very few women leading estates and very few young people working in wine in Bordeaux as well. What are the key changes that you've seen in your 25 years so far?
I think there have been lots of changes in terms of production, in the cellar, in the people, in the distribution, in the communication. Everything has changed tremendously since 25 years. one thing didn't change, probably, is the passion we put in everything to reach the same level of excellence and elegance and style in our wine. But if I'm looking at what happened in the field, the viticulture of today has nothing compared to the viticulture of 25 years ago. The technology we have in our cellar, and we actually, since 2 years, have the benefit of using a new fantastic tool with a cellar we created from scratch, full of innovation and helping us to cope with all the climatic changes, of course, but also to be the prolongation of the work in the vineyard. So that's very important. And when you look at people, I mean, our industry really changed considerably, having much more young people. You have to remember that in the past, you had to have another job to inject money in those estates because they were not self-sufficient. So it was run as a hobby, and my grandfather did wonderful things during many years, but he was doing that in the evening and in the weekend. It was not a full-time job. So today you have dedicated people who spend most of their time working on the estates, and they are also super well educated and trained. So the level of knowledge is also much higher. And when you look at the retail, that also changed a lot. The way you are selling wine is probably completely different than 25 years ago. And I'm not even talking about communication with, of course, the speed up of changes which came through the pandemic.
That's really, really interesting. Particularly the fact that many producers have gone from hobbyists to a really professional approach. This is their full-time job, and there's a lot more education and training. We were talking actually just before the webinar started. You had some really interesting statistics about the gender balance between sort of people working within the industry, but also those studying for qualifications in the industry, and it's changed quite a lot in a short space of time.
Yes, I was relying to an article published in January by the Revue du Vin de France about actually the role of women, and a few numbers catch my eye. In 2016, 13,000 women, which is 12%, were heads of wine growing operations. And in 2019, it's actually 33% of women were working in the vineyard. But what is very interesting is the percentage of students in the 2022-2023 DNO classes. DNO is a Diplôme National d'Œnologue, because 47% of those students are actually women. So it really shows the progression of women in our field in a very impressive way. It is actually very good, and I'm very happy about it, although I always believed in complementarity. I think what Haut-Bailly is good at, and it's very funny because we did it without any purpose of doing it, but 50% of the team at Haut-Bailly is made of women. And in every field, vineyards, cellar, offices. So I always believed in great complementarity between men and women.
That's really interesting. And was that a deliberate choice? Were you deliberately trying to hire for gender balance, or that's just the way it came about?
Yes. Yes, I think we always considered that skill, talent, expertise, motivation, passion is first. And so you look at what is a person made of, it's not a question of gender, it's a question of skill.
Yeah, that's heartwarming to hear. And you know, the theme this year for International Women's Day is embracing equity, and when will we reach equity? But to have 47% of students training to be enologues, they're already women. That's really really fantastic to hear. So a huge amount of progress in just a few years.
Yeah.
Are there any areas in Bordeaux, in the industry, where you think we can do more to support women or to push for even more balance and equity?
Well, I don't think so, because women are making their ways, and you see them everywhere. You see them in the vineyard, and we will have a publication this week on our social media about a woman working with us since a long time, and 5 years ago she wanted to learn pruning, and which is normally a men's specialty because it's quite hard, and she learned, and since 5 years she's also pruning as all the men in the vineyard. In the cellars you see lots of women today, and no, women are everywhere, and it's good.
You've obviously you have a privileged position as having seen so much change in Bordeaux. You also have a huge amount of respect for your talent and all of the work that you've put in the past 25 years. Lots of newcomers to the wine trade really look up to you and respect you. What advice would you give to someone who is looking to get into the wine trade? How would you suggest that they build their career?
Well, I think the first thing is to get to know the product extremely well. And I'm not going to tell you that. You, being a master of wine, you know what you're talking about. But take time, do internship in estates, travel the world, because great vineyards are all over the world, and do as many tasting as you can, because that's where you're going to learn. If you love the product, if you're passionate about it, first of all, you will discover a world of civilization. You will meet great people, and that's really key, I think. And then it's probably something my father told me and my grandfather: live your dream, live your dream. If you like it, you never work anymore. It will be your hobby, you know, your hobby, your work will be your hobby, your passion. And so I think that's very important. But stay close to the product as much as you can and know it extremely well. That would be my recommendation. And in terms, in my own life, I know that my few recipes were start from scratch every year. Never think you know anything, just learn from zero every single year. And that's the way we've been doing at Haut-Bailly, because we think that we always have to progress, and it's a permanent evolution in order to stay true to our terroir and adapt ourselves to the world which is changing, the climate which is changing, the condition of production, etc., etc. So our philosophy is very much on the Kaizen Japanese concept of being on the move and adding very small, tiny changes, which will be a smooth evolution and not brutal changes of direction, you see. So, yes.
Fantastic. That's, yeah, I mean, it's interesting you talk about sort of the changes needed, and particularly with respect to the climate. I mean, we are about to head into the En Primeur campaign for Bordeaux 2022. And last year, the region suffered days over 40 degrees Celsius and even forest fires. So that was really a year of extremes. Did Haut-Bailly have to do anything particular, anything special to protect the vines for 2022?
To protect the vines from what?
From the extreme heat, and to make sure that you could still produce beautiful wines.
No, actually not really. And I think the vine is a plant which is extremely resistant first, and then which is also in permanent adaptation. So I believe the fact that we had a few years before 2022, where it was getting warmer every year, help the plant itself to get used to it and adapt. And I was struck by the fact that if you were looking at the forest around us or the trees, it was obvious that the trees were suffering. But if you were looking at the vineyard was green and not suffering. It's also because we always made the right choice in our viticulture, and taking great care of our soils help the water also to be preserved, you know, and there's also particularity at Haut-Bailly, which is that we have lots of clay. So this vintage is quite impressive because although we had a drought and very hot climate, we managed to do wine with a certain balance, freshness, fruitiness. They are actually beautiful wines, and they will definitely belong to the vintage of anthology, which are the great hot vintage like 82, 89, 19, 2009, 2010, and of course the trio 18, 19, 20 more recently. So I can't wait to receive you to taste the 2022, because I think you will be surprised by what we achieved to do.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. We've spoken about sort of women within the wine industry, but certainly from my perspective, there is still very much a dominance towards men who drink and enjoy wine. And I'm always keen to encourage as many women as possible to get into wine, to learn about wine, to start collecting wine. And I think that there can be a perception that Bordeaux in particular is perhaps not that approachable for women who are just starting to learn about wine. From your perspective in Bordeaux, do you see that? Do you think that there's a preference for men to buy Bordeaux? And if so, how do we go about fixing that?
Well, it depends on the country. If you are looking at Japan, for example, women are very keen on Bordeaux. And as a woman, I would definitely recommend to women to drink Bordeaux when they're cooking in the evening, during dinner, and eventually even after dinner, because it's excellent for women. I think Bordeaux is making wine which are about style, you know. We are not following the fashion. We are faithful to our terroir, and especially Haut-Bailly, it's Haut-Bailly's philosophy. And our wines are perfectly timeless, you know. So I think if the women could choose few of the wines they would love and trust, they will stick to Bordeaux, because women love fashion for sure, but we are about style, and they also love style. So I'm sure we can convince them to drink more Bordeaux. So.
I like that. Yeah, I think particularly this idea that these are sort of big wines that have to be served alongside a very rich meal can be off-putting. How do you prefer to sort of drink your own wines? Do you have a preferred dish to serve them with, or actually do you find that Bordeaux is very versatile and can be drunk on lots of different occasions?
Well, I tend to think that today Bordeaux, lots of great Bordeaux are so close to perfection that you can enjoy them anytime, you know. And even in Bordeaux, we used to drink our wines with food, but today, quite often, I love to enjoy a glass of wine before dinner, because we have wines made of lots of balance, silkiness, incredible harmony and charm, you know, so you just enjoy those wines by itself. But of course, if you can drink Haut-Bailly having a lovely meat or a light dish, not too much gravy, but just something very, very tasty, a product which has a taste of what it is, or I'm also thinking of a wonderful truffle, if you can find any at the moment, black truffle. A Saint-Nectaire as a cheese would be perfect. No, there are many things you can drink Haut-Bailly with. I eventually even drink it with some fish from time to time when it's well cooked, very fresh, and with a red wine sauce.
Lovely. You're making me hungry now. Fascinating. I think it'd be really interesting to hear what our audience thinks. So if you have any questions for Véronique, whether it's about sort of her role, whether it's about the wider industry within Bordeaux, whether it's about the wines, please do pop them in the Q&A. It would be really, really interesting to hear what our viewers are thinking. Wait for Henrietta to see what we have.
So I've got the first question that's just come in, Barbara, is what's the biggest change that you've seen in the industry throughout your career? And that's from Claudia.
The biggest change in the industry, which means on the distribution side or also on the production side?
I think whatever you think.
There have been so many changes that I don't know where to start, actually. I think we always tried to respect our terroir, because our terroir exists since many centuries. We do wine at Haut-Bailly since probably 600-700 years, and we are just here for a few years, few decades, and we will pass it on to the next generation. But I'm struck today with the care, the scientific approach, the agricultural approach of what we are doing today. I think, and it's just the beginning of discovering lots of things. We will continue to learn in the future tremendously. Every year we have a new approach on the environmental aspect, which is very pragmatic, social, human-centric, and scientific. So we are just at the beginning of it. But that's probably the biggest revolution of Bordeaux right now. It's happening in the vineyards. Of course, the technology we have in our cellar makes it quite incredible. And we have complete integration in the landscape, in the environment, and that will help us to gain in precision in a way that was difficult to reach in the past. And I remember my grandfather explaining me that in the past, or at his time, they were doing a great vintage from time to time when nature let them do. If you are looking at the history of Bordeaux in the last 20 or 25 years, we did a series of great vintages, which is just incredible. So today, we are working in a way that the dedication, the care, the precision, the technology help us to deliver a great wine almost every year. And Haut-Bailly is very well known for its consistency, for being able to do great wines in great vintages, but also to create a great wine in a more challenging year. So and everything, all the technology developed today help us in that dimension. And in the industry, when I'm thinking of the distribution, it also changed a lot, and I'm sure you know it very well at Berry Brothers. The way we are selling wine today is incredible. The way we are keeping the wines, transporting the wine, talking with the clients, getting the direct contact, the fact that we were able to travel, meet the people who love to share our passion even during COVID, through webinar like this one. I think it's fascinating. And if people want to enjoy what we are doing every day, they can also go on social media and follow what we are doing every day. That wasn't existing in the past. So there is a transparency of information, which is also something very new.
I've got, thank you, that was lovely. I've got a couple of questions here which are slightly linked. First of all, what advice would you give to a young woman interested in entering the wine industry today? And then kind of in addition to that, I've got someone who's a French expat herself, planning a return to her home country. And it's good to hear confirmation from you, Véronique, that the first thing to enter the field is to know the product very well. She already does that. She's a lawyer, but she's retraining in wine law. And she does feel that it's key to do internships in vineyards and working with a sommelier, maybe working in a wine shop and doing WST level 3. But is there anything else that you would suggest if you're embarking on a career in the wine industry?
Well, there's lots of programs you can do, like WSET, yes, and wine tastings. If you are lucky to live in London or Paris or wherever, there's so many clubs and wine tasting organized that you can really train and learn from that. And then every time you have a few days off, come and visit us, spend time with us, have a look on the way we are working, and let's taste wine together. That's really that the best way to learn is also to learn from the place, because it's where, of course, you feel everything, you feel the ambiance, you see how it works, and it's so easy to understand it. And I'm sorry, the first question was?
Any particular advice for young women entering the wine industry?
Oh, yes. Well, I think I answered it.
Yes.
I think on the industry side, I mean, I would absolutely add to what Véronique said. Tasting is incredibly important, and just talking to people within the industry. Everyone is so generous with their time, with their advice, whether it's going to a property and spending time learning in the cellar or in the vineyards, even if it's sort of emailing people and just getting their perspective on what they do and their roles. There are also lots of really great mentoring schemes which have now been set up within the industry, a really good opportunity to speak to people at kind of executive level with decades of experience. And the joy of the wine industry is it's relatively small in a way. Everyone sort of knows or is in touch with people across the industry. So you do actually have access to executive teams. If you were in banking, it would be very difficult for you to talk to the CEO of a bank, but that's just not true in wine. You'll be able to talk to people at all levels, and they will all be really, really happy to help and offer you their time and wisdom. So don't be afraid, get stuck in.
We are smaller companies than banks.
Absolutely. I've got another question here for Véronique. Do you think enough is being done to adapt to a new generation of female wine drinkers and enthusiasts? And does Haut-Bailly particularly have any forward-looking plans as to how to best engage with this particular segment of customers?
That's a good question. It's funny because I never thought in terms of gender, either to run the team here or to address to our consumers. So my main concern is to make the best wine as possible every year, and to respect the terroir, to let it express at its best, to deliver a great wine every single year in its true dimension. So that's why I'm not thinking in terms of category of people. And I guess that when you're having a great wine, it makes unanimity. And very often, the women who are tasting Haut-Bailly are falling in love with it quite easily, because Haut-Bailly is about suppleness. It has power, but it has an incredible softness. The tannins are extremely silky. There are nothing aggressive in our wine. So I guess that's why women love Haut-Bailly, because of the eternal elegance, you know, the intemporel elegance. So yeah, I'm not talking specifically to women. Maybe I should do. If you have any good ideas, I'd be happy to come to London to do events dedicated to women. But I just think that when you taste, you usually like it or don't like it, but usually people love Haut-Bailly. Yeah.
I think perhaps people, certainly female clients that I've got, have a sort of certain love for Bordeaux because it's not traditionally seen as something which women do drink, or, you know, there's a slightly, I suppose, mystique around it that's seen as quite a male-dominated wine. But I think when people do get a chance to try it, and when women do try it, it really is a sensational wine, particularly, of course, Veronique's style. As you say, it's very approachable, easy to drink. So I completely agree. We haven't got any other questions at the moment in the chat, but if anyone else does have anything they would like to ask, please do put it forward now.
I mean, from my side, Veronique, I would be interested to hear which other wine regions around the world are you looking at with interest? Is there a particular country or a particular region where you're really keeping a close eye on how they adapt to changing weather patterns, how they're evolving?
Well, it's fascinating to see that today it's hard to find wine region where producing bad wines. And when I started, I mean, you could taste lots of bad wines or wines with lots of default. Today, it's fascinating to see there is a level of quality around the world which is just great. And I really enjoy tasting lots of wines from different countries. I always had a passion for Burgundy, and it's not changing, except that the move in Burgundy can be frightening, but I was there a few days ago and I always enjoy it so much. But we also go easily to Spain and Italy. I fell in love with South Africa a few years ago, and Napa is, of course, very impressive also in the quality level, although they are fighting with lots of climate change, fires and frightening things. But we have also lots of friends in Napa, so we are lucky to be able to taste lots and lots of wines.
Fantastic.
I've got another question here. Sort of linked a little bit actually to Burgundy. Does gendered wine language help or hinder women working in the wine industry? For example, Burgundy being described as feminine.
Well, I'm not sure we can still say that today. And it's true that in Bordeaux, we usually used to say that the wines up north in the Médoc were more masculine, when the wines from Margaux and Pessac-Léognan were more feminine. The world is changing, so we have to adapt our language. But Burgundy is not always feminine, actually. You have big wines in Burgundy. The thing is that with Burgundy, you probably taste the wine mostly focused on the aromas, when in Bordeaux, you taste the wines more in the tactile sensation of the wine in the mouth. But I disagree with that point, because I think you have very masculine wines in Burgundy, as you do in Bordeaux, and reverse, you have very feminine wines, and Pessac-Léognan and Margaux wines are definitely what we could say, we could call feminine wines, I think.
I think it's a really fascinating question, sort of this idea of language and how we talk about wines and how we describe wines. I mean, I've certainly been guilty in the past of falling back on these. That they can be quite handy shorthand if you're teaching or trying to express the style of a wine, because of course describing wine is so very difficult. and everyone experiences it differently. But I mean, I certainly find myself today being a little bit more considered, and if I'm leaning towards saying, oh, this is a feminine wine or a masculine wine, I will try and think of a different way of expressing that. And just consider, what is it that I'm trying to say? How am I trying to describe this wine? But the vocabulary around wine is something I personally find fascinating. It's an ever-evolving conversation, I think. Anything that makes us think a little bit more about it is a good thing, I would say.
Yeah, I would. For me, wine is mostly about emotion. And when you're in a wine tasting, there are a few wines which might be very well made. No problem, you know, you consider the high level of quality, but doesn't talk to you. And certain wines will deliver a timeless emotion, which is very strong, very dominant in the impression. And that's probably where is the difference between a good wine and a great wine. A great wine that you expect to spend a good moment with, you know it will deliver, and you look at it when it's young, you look at it when it's mature, and then you see when it's really at the right time to open the bottle, constantly checking your vintage at different stage of its life to see if it always delivers the same emotion. Of course, the emotion will be changing because you're also changing yourself, but I think it's the most important criteria for me when we are tasting wine is the emotion you get or you don't get with the wine which is talking to you.
Thank you very much. I've got a slightly different question now, which says, are you concerned about climate change in Bordeaux?
Well, so far, I have to say climate change had been good for Bordeaux. And in the last 20 years, it helped us producing wines which are more ripe, which are made from warm summer, you know. So far it's been good for Bordeaux. But what we can notice since probably, I would say 2017, is that every year we have more extreme climates. So that means we will have to deal with frosts almost every year since 2017, but also with drought, with time of deluge, heavy rainfall, and few days of extremely warm weather. So we are noticing that we have more extreme conditions to deal with every year. And I remember in the past that I learned that a great vintage was done in very easy condition, when everything was pure happiness, you know, easy to realize. Today, it's fascinating to see that we did a few great vintages, and I'm thinking of, for example, of 18, 19, 20, and 22, in extreme conditions, and they are amazing vintages. So the rules of the game are changing, and we are running lots of different reflections on how we can adapt ourselves to avoid having too many problems and taking care, of course, of our environment. But it is true that the rules of the game are not exactly the same as it used to be, for example, in 2009 or 2010, when everything was just easy to do, to make a great vintage.
Fantastic. I think we've got time for just one more question, if there is. Yeah, one that you could select for us, Henrietta.
I've got just the question here from Jill, who's just finished her diploma in WST.
Congratulations.
Results in a couple of months, apparently. So, is the wine industry accommodating for all ages of women, would you say?
Well, I don't know what age Jill is talking about. I know I was a good example of it, because when I started, I was relatively young. You didn't have any young woman in the business, and I made it. So I think there's no problem. Again, I think it's a question of skill, of passion, of wish to be dedicated to what you're going to do. But I trust there are room for everyone in this industry. And we're happy to share this passion, because we are nothing without the people who are talking about us, distributing us, and drinking our product, you know. So every year we want to do the best wine we never did, but if you are not there to distribute it, to talk about it as a master of wine, or to enjoy it as a wine lover, we are working for nothing. So I'm sure there are room for everyone.
I would definitely agree with that. I think partly because there is so much to learn in the wine industry. It takes so long to accumulate all of that knowledge, whether it's, you know, leading a property for a quarter of a century, or whether it's, you know, really learning sort of to taste all of those wines. And so, you know, I see sort of women at all ages within the industry, and, you know, a lot of respect for women who've been in the industry for a very long time, because they have built up these relationships with fantastic producers, and they've built up that breadth and depth of knowledge, which is so important. So I'm hopeful that we will see even more women both in the industry and enjoying these wonderful, wonderful wines in the years ahead. And Véronique, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your time, your wisdom, your experience with us today. It really means a lot to have a producer who we are such a fan of be able to give up their time for us. And thank you everyone for dialing in. I really hope that you found this an interesting insight into both Bordeaux, but also the industry and yeah, sort of women within wine. We'll be sending out a follow-up with a few details pointing to Véronique's wine, which is in a case of wines made by wonderful women that we pulled together. And if you have any questions at all, please do respond to that email, and I will be very happy to get back to you. Thank you very much for joining us, and please enjoy the rest of your day.